Now we're going to talk about a feature that is still to this day one of my most favorite features in Photoshop, and that is layer styles. They've been around for quite some time, and they really haven't changed all that much. There's been a few little enhancements here and there since they were first introduced, and it is an invaluable tool for any Photoshop designer, and any photographer for that matter. But in the sense of design, I use layer styles all the time for numerous reasons. I just want to share with you a couple of cool little things I utilize them for, and kind of give you an idea of what you can start experimenting with and coming up with different arrangements of your own. And the reason layer styles is one of my favorite features is that it can never be fully figured out. It's always there's always ideas evolving from it. Like I said, it's pretty funny that there hasn't been too much added to the feature since it was introduced, but the possibilities of it by mixing and just combining and experimenting with different layer styles can get you a whole world of effects, and I still am discovering new ones as I go. But a few of my favorite ones here, I just want to show you, just kind of give you an idea of what you can do. One thing, especially for designers, is backgrounds. Creating backgrounds, being able to manage them, especially seamless ones, is quite a challenge. And using layer styles gives you an edge over that and giving you multiple options all in one single panel. For instance, here I've got this texture here. It's actually a background element. I searched for all seamless patterns. And found this one. It was actually a really cool, interesting gray pattern, which is good because I want to be able to colorize it myself later on. And keeping it in a gray scale tone like this works pretty well. But like I said, this is a seamless pattern. If it's not, you can always go to Filter and go to Other and choose Offset, and then just kind of offset the graphic and see if it truly does a seamless graphic, or if you need to make any adjustments in it. In this case, I do not. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and define this as a pattern. So we're going to the Edit menu, go down here to Define Pattern, and you can give it a name. We'll just call it Background 1. And we'll click OK. So now this pattern is saved inside Photoshop, and I can utilize it anytime. I don't have to reopen the file and redefine it as a pattern. It is now saved in Photoshop until I go in there and delete it. So I'm going to go and minimize this file. Let's go and bring up a file we're going to build our design in. And in here, I've got the document sized up, and I've got the text in there, which we'll get to in just a moment. But I'm going to create a new blank layer and give it a base fill of 50% gray, normal 100%. There we go. Now, when you are applying a pattern that you've defined inside Photoshop, there are a couple of ways you can go about applying that pattern. Now, one way, of course, is to just simply go and do the Shift Delete or Shift Backspace, open up the fill window, and go in here and choose Pattern. And then you can locate the pattern you defined here in the window. The problem with this is, and I'll just go and click OK, it's going to fill it with whatever size it was defined at into whatever size your document is. So if it's defined large and you're working in a small resolution file, it's going to apply it very, very large. If it's very, very large document and you've only defined it as small, relatively small size, it's only going to fill in part of it. It will tile it, but in most cases, you're not going to have control over it. Whatever you want, you click OK, it's going to fill it, and you're done. I don't like to use that method, actually. What I like to do is actually use layer styles, and here's how. So I'm going to go in here into the layer style menu and choose Pattern Overlay. And you'll see that same pattern menu right here. I'm going to go and locate that same pattern texture, and the most recent one you defined will be the very last one in the list here. So we'll go ahead and check on that. Now, the advantage you have here over the previous method is that you can control the scale. If I take the scale slider and move this down, you see that the pattern gets smaller. It's automatically tiling it, so it's repeating it, and this is why it's important for it to be a seamless pattern, so it tiles seamlessly, as you see right there. And I can make it larger or smaller depending on what I want it to do. So in this case, I'm going to bring it down to about 40%. And the beauty of this, of course, in layer styles is that you can move the layer style panel to the side and actually manually move the pattern around just by clicking and dragging on the document. Another very helpful feature when you want to get an exact positioning. But we're not done yet. We've applied the pattern. Let's apply some more effects to it. For instance, a color. Remember, I left it gray because I want to be able to use layer styles and blend modes, as we talked about earlier, to apply a color effect. So I'm going to do Color Overlay. And I think I'm going to actually make it more of a blue texture. Let's start with that. And the other beauty of layer styles when you apply them like this is that they're always editable. You can go back and make changes. Even after you click OK here, you can go back and modify the changes. It hasn't done anything permanent to whatever's on your layer. So I'm going to change the blend mode of this color overlay to overlay. And that looks pretty good. But again, don't forget to maybe try a few other blend modes you're familiar with, and maybe it'll look a little bit better. But in most cases, I noticed that overlay is a good place to start, and in most cases will be the best one. Okay, so we're not done yet. One more layer style to add, and again, this goes back to the beauty of layer styles, is that you can stack layer styles on top of layer styles to achieve an effect you never thought you could, or you would perhaps take multiple layers to do. All can be done in one layer with using layer styles. So what we're going to do is add a gradient overlay. And I'm going to go make it radial and reverse it, so the light area is in the middle, and let's increase the scale of it. And then once again change the blend mode to overlay. And look, we've got a spotlight effect. And just like the pattern, we can go in here and move that light around. So what was earlier a simple flat, in fact I like soft light better, it allows more of the ambient area to come out there. So what started out as a simple gray, almost boring texture, we now have control over, all from within this panel. We can go in here and scale it down and apply color effects and apply even lighting effects, as we're doing with the gradient here, to create an environment, a mood out of this one textured image here. And I'll click OK, and there we have our image is applied. And again, editable layer styles. I can go in here, double click on the effects icon and open it up and go back to where those settings were and make any changes I want. If I want that texture to be a little bit smaller, I can do that. All the effects will redraw and it will take it up. I can go in here and turn these effects off temporarily. I can turn a specific effect off if I want. If I think, no, I don't want that pattern overlay, or perhaps I don't want that gradient overlay, I can go ahead and see what that's going to look like. Absolute control over all these effects. And then lastly, we'll just add my text, and just to give the text the illusion that it's kind of floating in the atmosphere, let's add a simple drop shadow layer style. And what I just did there, you can access the layer styles numerous ways. You can go in here and click on the effects menu, go down here and choose the layer style you want to apply. You can access it from within the layer menu up here up top. Just go down here to layer style and choose in here as well. I just like to go into the layer and double click on an empty area of the layer itself. Opens up the layer style panel, and let's add a drop shadow, and let's go in here and manually move it to the side there a little bit. Drop its opacity down, and now we're getting the illusion that this text is really kind of floating over this wall. And it's merely two layers, one text layer, one simple layer, simple color-filled layer with the texture applied, all utilizing layer styles. Very, very cool feature. Just to show you another part of it, if you're a designer, you're no doubt working with text. You want to make your text, a little bit spicier than just flat colored text like this. Here I have this logo looking pretty good. I've got the graphic here, and this text is all formatted and it looks good and everything like that, but it just doesn't punch like it should. So I'm going to add some layer styles. So I'm going to double click on it, and let's go and experiment. And again, this is what you need to do, especially if you're a designer, is go in here and just play around with things. You're going to discover things that work well for you, and those are great starting points. But you really just got to go in here and just see what you can make happen. So I'm going to first apply a bevel and emboss in the text, and I'm going to turn off global light, and I'm going to grab the angle. See the small target right inside here. I'm going to move that closer to the center. And you notice how it positions the edge light on the text here. Let's actually zoom it in so you can see what's going on here. I'm going to increase the depth a little bit and the size somewhat. You notice what happens to the text when I do these things. When I make these subtle changes, some very interesting things start to come about. So I can give a little bit of an edge on that text there. It's not too bad. Looking pretty good. I can maybe add a gradient overlay in this case. Again, changing it to overlay. Maybe give a little bit of a rotation so the darker areas on the side there. That's looking pretty good. Maybe go and add a stroke on this. Increase that to around 5. Nah, 5's a little bit much. Let's do like 3. You can set it to be on the inside of the text or on the outside in this case because we have the beveling going on. A lot of different possibilities on here. So I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And there, just in a few clicks with layer styles, I'm giving this text considerable depth it didn't have before. Maybe I'll just go ahead and add a drop shadow back in there. Let it just kind of rise off the background there a little bit. And through just simple layer styles, we can give the text a little bit more dimension than it already had. So there's a lot of possibilities, again, using the way you apply patterns and textures and different things like that. You can control, fake lighting and even get some dimension using bevel and emboss and things like that. But there's a lot of different possibilities. Again, experimentation is going to be the key, and layer styles can certainly give you a lot of interesting effects that you may not have thought of before.